Okay, it looks like we are at our Zoom capacity, so other people will be joining us on YouTube, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Yes, you are automatically on mute, and you are automatically, your camera is automatically muted as well. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Using Innovative and Alternative Approaches for De-Escalating Individuals in Crisis Situations. Our presenters today are Berkeley Carnine and Chelsea Swift from Cahoots. Cahoots, Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, is a 24-hour mobile crisis intervention program through Whitebird Clinic in Eugene, Oregon. Its mission is to improve the response to mental health crises, substance abuse, and homelessness. Berkeley is an educator, crisis worker, and organizer in Eugene, Oregon. Berkeley currently serves as Whitebird Clinic's community education specialist and as a mobile crisis counselor with Cahoots. Berkeley has extensive experience, including facilitating trainings and workshops on topics such as anti-oppression, nervous system support, de-escalation, and better bystander intervention. Berkeley brings her passion for healing, empowerment, and social transformation to everything she does, and believes everyone deserves dignity and well-being. Chelsea Swift, aka Swift, is a first responder, a community organizer, a crisis counselor with Cahoots, and a harm reductionist who is committed to interrupting stigma and overdose deaths through naloxone trainings and distribution. Swift enjoys sharing real experience and social justice-driven trainings for de-escalation and crisis intervention, and has been involved in consulting projects across the United States who are implementing the Cahoots model. Swift is a proud cat owner and member of the queer community who dreams of a better world with her partner and their cats from their cabin in the woods. My name is Kristen Dahl, and on behalf of the Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities National Training Center, I would like to thank you for taking the time to be here today. Please visit our social media and website, mhddcenter.org, for resources related to mental health and developmental disabilities. Next slide, Brandon. We have a few housekeeping items to go over. If you are joining us on Zoom, the controls are located at the bottom bar of your Zoom window. Please use the chat box if you have any comments or technical issues, and we will do our best to assist you. Please use the Q&A to submit questions to our presenters. We will read your questions to Berkeley and Swift as time allows throughout the presentation. There is a hand-raising feature you can use if you need assistance from the MHDD team. Other than those presenting the webinar, everyone is muted and camera access is turned off. This webinar is being live captioned. You can turn on captions in the Zoom window by clicking the CC button on the menu and selecting Show Subtitles. You can also change the size of the caption text by selecting Subtitle Settings. ASL interpreting services are being provided by Central Kentucky Interpreter Referral. The webinar is also being broadcast live on YouTube. If you are joining us on YouTube, please add your questions and comments to the live chat on the right-hand side of your screen. Next slide. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the MHDD YouTube channel and the MHDD website later this week. A PDF of the presentation slides will be available as well. We will be sending out an email following the webinar with an evaluation. We ask you to complete the evaluation so we can improve future webinars. The email will also include instructions on how to receive continuing education credits. For those of you just joining us, welcome to the webinar, Using Innovative and Alternative Approaches for De-Escalating Individuals in Crisis Situations. Thank you for being here. I'll now turn it over to our presenters, Berkeley and Swift from Cahoots.
Thanks so much for having us, Kristen, and everybody at the Training Center, and welcome. I'm just going to pull up our slides and we'll get started. Really amazing to be here with everybody committed to this work.
Okay, hi, my name is Chelsea Swift. I'm a crisis worker with Cahoots and an EMT on Cahoots as well. I am here today with Berkeley. We do a lot of community education, and we're both folks who work on the van on Cahoots right now. And as it was said earlier, Cahoots stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. Next slide. Okay, so Cahoots has been catapulted in a conversation in 2020 in the last year. Our program has existed since 1989, and Whitebird Clinic was founded in 1969. So it's very, we're holding some different worlds. Like what we were born out of in our community was to address mental health, addiction, homelessness, and you kind of see that nod to it in this headline from 1989 when we first rolled on the streets like this experimental project. Here we are 2020, 31 years later, and Cahoots is being asked to talk about our program simultaneously during a live stream of George Floyd's funeral. So we are very, very grateful for the platform that we've been given. And within our work, there is a lot of ways mobile crisis response could look, but our operations has always been within the dispatch system of our local police department. And what that allows us to do is to catch calls or become involved on calls that would otherwise only have the option of police or traditional EMS. So these are sentiments that our clinic, Whitebird Clinic, is a federally qualified health center at this point. We have a variety of different medical, dental, counseling, case management programs. And so much of this stuff can feel pretty basic, but our clinic has been around for 51 years now. And when we really embody these things, still today in my work, it really holds up. So these words were probably written long time ago, but at Whitebird Clinic, we believe that each person deserves respect for their own beliefs and experience. We treat people with unconditional positive regard. Our role is to be available to help out where we can with the least intervention necessary to facilitate a healthy and safe process for everyone. We will try to bring least intervention necessary a lot into the rest of the presentation, but what this is defining out the gate is that, yes, we are wonderful at our jobs and we come with a lot of skills, but generally what we are trying to do is problem solve, figure out what has worked for somebody before when they've been in this situation. How can I empower someone to find a solution within their own world so that the other 364 days of the year, when Cahoots is not sitting in the room, will this person be able to follow these same steps? So a lot of our work looks like spending a lot of time to keep folks out of traditional systems that may only provide resolve in the moment, but could potentially always do more harm. Next slide. Okay, so this starts off very basic, but we know about ourselves that our physical, emotional health are impacted by basic human needs. So that coming down to food, water, sleep, the coping mechanisms that we're able to access. And we know about a lot of the folks that we work with on Cahoots are the exact people who have been systematically deprived of those basic human needs. And that also being emotional basic needs, being listened to, being respected, being able to have agency over where you're able to sleep, where you're able to use the bathroom. So I think on Cahoots, we are really good at holding how much weight needs to be held when we know that some of the most profoundly suffering people that we meet is someone who has not slept in 4 days. And we know all that can come with that. So we really try to hold that with ourselves when we operate. We're always in teams of 2. So we're always kind of giving each other our inventory of needs at the beginning of a 12-hour shift, and having a really good practice around both the basic needs and where we are at emotionally, what our triggers are today, a call that came up yesterday that was really hard that maybe we need support on today. So we want to be always sharing that, so that when the day comes that it's like, I didn't sleep, I haven't eaten, I have worked 5 days in a row, I've seen this client every day for the last 5 days, I'm really gonna need your support, please. We don't want that to be the first conversation that you're having. Cool.
Great. So a lot of our framework is really around, least intervention necessary, and thinking about how we show up situation, how we're treating a person, what we're seeing, all these things. And so we like to emphasize the way that, like, who I am, my worldview, and how the person I'm interacting with, if I see them as deserving of basic needs and dignity and respect and agency over the choices that impact them, then that's going to shape the quality of my intervention. If I see someone with disability as having inherent dignity and this needs and deserving of respect and empathy and connection in the same ways as I see somebody with without a disability with something else going on, that's going to shape how I interact. And we also like to just emphasize the way that a client is going to remember how I may feel during an interaction, but not the exact words I said. So sometimes we can get really fixated on, like, how do I say the exact right thing that fix the situation? So this is an invitation to kind of drop in more and think about it really holistically, in terms of how it's going to feel, as the takeaway. We reiterate for ourselves often that we can't control the outcome of a situation, and that I'm only in charge of how I up. And in that, we have outcomes we want. We want somebody to be safe and to get the support they need, and to, maybe for the police not to have to be involved. We might want for somebody to not have to go to the hospital if that's what we know they would prefer. And so we're holding that we have desires for these outcomes, and also that if we get too attached, actually trying to control it, then we're no longer really supporting somebody else's agency in that, and we can not have the same kind of capacity for creative responses and problem solving when we're really, really attached. So think about controlling how I show up, and having to have a different way of relating to outcome. And like Swift was saying, ideally, I'm going to enter a situation as grounded as possible and rested and present. And so sometimes that's even just like noticing, like, oh, I have to send this text. Just remembered, if I don't communicate something, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be thinking about it as I'm, coming to see what's going on for this person. And they're going to feel that I'm not present. And so even just if it's sending a text or taking that sip of water or taking that breath, doing the things that support us to show up present. And on that, just in this moment, an invitation to look around and let your eyes kind of go where they want to go in the space. We're on computer together, and it's so nice to get to connect in this way, but also just seeing how things are looking in your space, maybe seeing where the sun is. If you have a window you can access, listening, if listening is the way that you're connecting to the environment, or feeling just the position you're in, any way that you're connecting to the environment, and noticing, like, what is here now? How do I get information about kind of present moment safety. And that is one of the practices I really use when I'm getting grounded before entering into a situation. And also we talk about like, sometimes we just actually need to know where we are. Like, what's the address? Like, what part of the building am I going into? And like that kind of like spatial orientation is giving my system so much information about like, okay, I'm present, I can respond, I can see everything happening, right? So that's one I really like. Breathing, connecting to breath can be really grounding for people. And thinking about like, what signals am I sending to myself? Am I sending signals of stress and alarm? Because if I'm sending those signals, I'm usually replicating that and showing that I'm stressed and I'm moving too quickly, not able to take in information I need to, and communicating, at this like nervous system body level to whoever I'm interacting with, that I'm also stressed and panicked. And I want to do the opposite, right? I want to convey that I'm grounded, that I'm present, that I'm safe, that I care. And so I'm thinking about things that I like to, say aloud or to myself, that it's like, okay, I've got this, or I know how to listen, or whatever the like really basic thing is that I want to come back to. I might just say it to myself. And yeah, we're always thinking about not moving too quickly, not rushing into it. Even if it's an urgent crisis situation, we're not going to rush in, because that's going to get us kind of in tunnel vision and not able to like do the things we need to do in the way that is going to provide more safety and more outcomes that we're looking for. So asking like, if I don't have time to take a breath and like assess what's even going on, if I'm rushing that much, then I might not be the best person for this situation. And so I might need to do something else if I can't. And ourselves, okay, emergency is a situation. Emergency I think I disappeared for a second there.
You did.
Okay, I might have to take off the video. There it is.
Just hang for a second. We're aware of the issues and we're working on them.
Okay, so back, everyone can see slides.
We can, thank you.
So stop my video for, see if this makes it work. So entering into a scene and asking, is this a scene or a situation or an emergency, right? And emergency are, things like fire, serious injury, violence, that we can't respond to. And a situation is something that can be solved. And so sometimes if we're not used to crisis situations, a situation can feel like an emergency. So I think just naming that and the importance of de-escalating ourselves first, and that pause and that breath and looking around to notice like, okay, this is either something, where I need to make a 911 call, or this is a situation that, I can engage with. I can safely interact and come up with some better options and other outcomes. And sometimes to be able to assess that, it's really about getting to ask some questions like, okay, can I see everybody who's involved in what's going on? Can I see if somebody's hurt, or like who's having the most acute crisis? Can I tell if somebody's breathing or not? I like this example with the least intervention necessary. If we see somebody who's like laying down, we might get a call for a subject down. We're going to like have to assess, like, is this an emergency, or is this a situation? And to be able to do so, we're gonna like approach somebody from the front and communicate a lot, like, hey, we're here, it's cahoots, so we want to make sure you're safe and you're okay. And we'll start by just trying to verbally engage, and if we're not getting a response, we're going to ask, like, let them know, hey, I'm just going to touch your foot, and start at the foot, right? Because that is the furthest place from somebody, and again, we're coming from in front of them, so that feels like as less threatening, because we know how threatening and vulnerable it can be to be sleeping out. And we're also just communicating and doing like the least intervention, starting there before we would like move to having to, say, eventually do a sternum rub or other things to see if somebody is overdosing or needs medical attention. And in that situation, I might not know for a while, and so I might still call for emergency medical. And if it turns out that I'm seeing a response and seeing, okay, this person is not having a medical emergency, then you can call in disregard. And we like to think about really being able to assess to see, is this a situation that we can handle. And things for that are things like slowing down, really listening, looking, getting a feel for what's happening, grounding yourself again. That tunnel vision can really mean we leave out, like, we're not getting crucial information, and asking, like, okay, is this safe enough to move forward? And there might be a situation where somebody is like waving something around and you're like, I think they're just having a time, but I can't tell if they might like use that as a weapon. And so thinking about how do we make this safer, you can say, hey, I want to talk with you, and I'd feel a lot better if you put that stick down for now, or whatever it is. And then if that happens, then you've made the situation safer and you can move forward. Or that could be like, hey, I think we should, let's come outside and talk outside. Things like that can be ways that we make a situation safer, or asking for a bystander or a coworker to come and help us address the situation, right? All those things. In thinking about ourselves as a tool, we're gonna use voice and language, and think about how we can meet someone where they're at, and also kind of support them in de-escalating themselves. And so if somebody's yelling a lot, and kind of speaking really fast, I'm not gonna go into my like slow, soothing, quiet voice to try to like, convince them to meet me. I'm gonna like join and like meet that volume and get their attention. And then I'm going to kind of use my volume like a ladder, like a scaffolding, to kind of step down, and like on this kind of more subconscious level that is just like giving the invitation, like, hey, you can also kind of come down in volume. And that can actually like, be really supportive to like notice, oh, I'm getting quieter. Maybe I'm like not as amped up as I was feeling. And it kind of gives that opening to come out of a more upset or kind of angry emotional experience. Similarly, thinking about meeting people where they're at and the tools we have, we're just meeting people in terms of the language they're using. That can be more like street language versus professional. If somebody is, cussing a lot and having a really hard time, and I'm like, yeah, it sounds like you've had a really shitty day, like that can really meet somebody and make somebody feel really heard. Or if somebody is like definitely not cussing and I do that, it's not gonna meet them where they're at and kind of join with them. So I'm gonna pay attention. Similarly, I'm not gonna speak super fast if somebody is speaking really quietly and slowly. I wanna not overwhelm them more. And when we're thinking about interacting with somebody, who it could be anything from super overwhelmed or not able to understand us, or has a hearing impairment, anything going on that is going to mean that we need to be more creative in our communication and think about how to be accessible. Some practices I really like are, we can ask yes or no questions, and give people the option of like two things. Can write things down, offer a pen and paper to communicate, sometimes like sketching things, all of that is available. Medics can kind of go through and really like show people what they're gonna do, let somebody touch a blood pressure cuff, demonstrate on yourself first, lots of different ways to kind of familiarize and make it again feel like somebody has agency to decide if they want that part of the medical eval, or if they want support in that way. I like to, the I statements around like, I want to make communication work, so let's try this, whether that's let's go outside to where it's quieter, and try to find some place that's a little less overwhelming, go in another room. I also like where we think a lot about audience, and if there's an audience kind of watching, that's going to further escalate a situation. So getting really creative in how we use space and get space. Can also think about noticing if somebody's using a self-soothing strategy, and just noticing like, hey, I see maybe you're rocking. Is that helping? Or is that helping you calm down? And if so, great. And if not, like, well, maybe taking a walk together or some other way to like get to be more active, or moving around is something that might be supportive.
Okay, I'm back. This next section is going to be about body language. And this is the part of the work that I always try to emphasize is what really, really keeps us safe. We have been operating for 31 years. No Cahoots worker has ever had a serious injury. And well, we'll just get into it. So these photos are just photos that I found in media coverage. So we normally are doing these presentations in person, and I needed some examples of these really important things that we do, and I was able to find them organically. So in this image, we have Ashley and Christian. Ashley is the crisis worker, and she is closer to the client, but she has Christian on the other side of her, so that we are not creating a situation where the client is going to have to look back and forth at two different people, which this is, you could just kind of see when you look at me. This creates, are we suspicious? Are we confused? Are we nervous of our area? So we're always trying to support the de-escalation with our own bodies and what we are maybe having our client's body do. Both of them have their hands visible, and in a casual position. It's not super authoritarian, or it's not super closed off. And we can often find ourselves in positions like that, thinking that like, oh, this is just really comfortable for me, not realizing that like what the client sees could be very different. Also, having both folks on one side kind of establishes we are your team. When we're able to sit like this and kind of be on the side of someone versus right in front, that is also communicating we're on the same page, we're a team. And in this environment of this restaurant as well, if I saw that from across the room, I might not necessarily realize like, oh, those are two, like that's an EMT and a first responder talking to someone who is in a crisis. Instead, we've created a kind of vignette of us looking really naturally in the space with each other. Next slide. Cool. So this is something that's pretty trademark Cahoots. And yes, not all bodies can create levels like this, because we are first responders, our jobs can come with these requirements on the nature of our work, but these skills should exist in all natures of work. So this photo on the bottom left with Dan, Dee, and Eric and the person sitting down in the white t-shirt. So it's two cahoots workers, and one is standing over and leaning towards the person. And that's a good way to start. You're demonstrating, as I'm walking up, hey, it's cahoots. We've been asked to check in with you. I'm starting to lean over. Do you think we could chat for a second? If that person says no, you have leaned over, you've demonstrated care, but you're able to back up and maybe start over or maybe disengage if there's not a safety issue. If that person has said yes, we might now try to, in the best way possible, come down to their level. In the photo with Dan, Dee, and Eric, you see that he is squatting. He has come down, but he's still standing on both of his feet. So if he needs to pop back up because this person has now changed their mind and said no thank you, he's going to be able to come from that low level straight back into a standing position and back up. And these are things that we might just say, like, as we're doing it, okay, thank you. Let me just back up a little bit. It's just cahoots, like reiterating our purpose and giving folks a reminder, especially for somebody who maybe was just sleeping or not engaged in their surroundings. I have to know that to be truly client-centered, that approaching someone like this, they have deeply ingrained coping skills and survival skills that have kept them alive by reacting in their first fight or flight response. So I need to honor that with my actions and words. Maybe in this bottom right photo, we see that Ashley and Christian have become really engaged. It looks like they're in conversation. That person is yelling, or I'm sorry, that person is laying down next to their wheelchair. So at this point, they've now committed to fully leaning down. What else here? That's probably it for this slide. We could go to the next one. So this is just another example. So this is a photo of me and Simone. And to start with the comments on the right side, so you can see that I'm kind of leaning. I'm doing like a little interested head lean. I have my arm crossed, just it is really natural to want to cross your arms. So we try to look for little ways to modify that. Another one would be, instead of putting your hands in your pockets, you could put your thumbs in your pockets, and that way your palms are still staying visible, but you get to be in a relaxed position with the way that you're holding your body. And in this photo, you can see how like my feet are kind of askew, so I'm not squared off exactly at the person that I'm talking to. I've tried to create different angles with all parts of my body to be disarming. What is really important as well is that we're not blocking anyone's exit. There are some maybe poor examples of that in the last slide, but in this one you can see depth is a little hard, but Simone and I are definitely, she's kind of staggered behind me. So we're not directly shoulder to shoulder as a force looking at someone. She's staggered behind me, but we're both kind of supporting each other with the same overall body language. I would say what I see with her, I know that Simone is a former sous chef, and Simone works on the fire department. So she is in what in those line of work is a really respectable stance with her hands behind her back. But in our work, that could be communicating like, what am I hiding? What little weapons am I hiding behind my back? So that alone could be a really distracting factor. That's where people are going to remember how we made them feel and not what we said. Also really important, the 2 arms lengths apart is basically what we now call social distancing. So we never want to get closer than, if I were to put my hand up to you in virtual world, you would put your hand up to me and we wouldn't be able to touch. That, when we're doing all of these different ways of modifying our bodies, still feels really intimate. So it doesn't feel like you're just standing inappropriately apart from each other, just talking at each other. Not blocking exits, extremely important, and it's going to be different for every space that you enter. And this is something I can tell you on every single Cahoots call. I am modifying and thinking about every space that I enter, how I can remain close to the exit, or at least not have somebody blocking my own exit while also keeping their exit open. So it's a lot to think about. It also becomes more clear, like if you're in your room right now, think of where the door is, and is there a big piece of furniture, or is there a dog I'm going to have to get past, and how can I start to modify that? And sometimes that looks like, hey, I would feel more comfortable being outside, or would you be able to put your dog in the yard so I could hear you better? We really have agency to be directable to help support someone. Next slide. Okay. This, I hope, feels helpful. This is something that I also try to use as a framework, knowing that it can feel hard to know how to pull a lot of this together from the training. So an example I like to use is a Cahoots call where we are being sent to ask someone to move who appears to be having a mental health crisis, and that crisis is taking place in the doorway of a business. So I am walking up to that person. Again, I'm announcing us, like they see the van we're getting out, like, hey, it's Cahoots. Wait until I get a little bit closer. Hi, gonna build rapport. My name's Chelsea with Cahoots. What's your name? If that's okay, let me know. We'll give some time to let them say what they want to say out the gate, try to figure out what's going on for them, who they are, how they found themselves here, how long they've been around this area. And then I'm going to be like, yeah, it was raining all night. You have just gotten out of the jail and you didn't get your mental health medications. Like, no wonder this is the best place for you. That makes sense. This business entrance has a great overhang. You were able to get dry. You're right downtown. People were able to give you food. Like, that is real. So I just want people to know, like, I see them. Their situation deserves to be seen. So I'm going to reflect back kind of those things that I just went over and say, like, okay, so all these needs brought you to this doorway. I am here because the person inside also has needs, which is that they're the business owner and it's time for them to open. And I also, yeah, you've been able to get snacks down here, but what if I took you somewhere where you could potentially get a shower or talk to a doctor who might be able to refill your meds? Because I see that that needs to happen too. Does that make sense? So I'm kind of just trying to lay out that we're moving towards an action, but that action is going to be out of what I heard this person's needs are. And if that is not resonating with them, or they're in a place where they're like, no, this is exactly where I need to be, this doorstep, I'm now going to start to lead with like outcome boundaries. So yes, I can't totally, I cannot guarantee you'll be able to be on this little doorstep forever, But again, I might be able to help you with the place with the shower or the medications. And if that's not what you want, like, let's just go get some snacks, but we can't do it right here because this business owner does have to open, and they are the ones who called us, and they asked us if we could not help you move, that we will have to call police to come trespass you or whatever. And I do this job because I don't think that needs to happen. So do you think I could give you 5 minutes? Maybe we'll step away. That is a really good tool, is if I've just steamrolled into this great interaction and somebody is starting to think about that change, I like to give some space and really name it, and also say, like, yeah, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. You could think about it, start to pack up your stuff, and then I'll re-engage, because I have that gift of time. And that time is often when we push through, where a situation can become a crisis or an emergency if we are pushing back too hard. So giving those time limits, again, is really like a gift you can give to yourself and that person, because then you don't feel like you're acting out of reactivity. So it's not like, oh my God, I just tried for 20 minutes. They're not coming, whatever, I'm leaving, I'm calling the police. No, I get to say, I gave 5. I offered these different things and they didn't take it. That's where I can't be attached to the outcome. And I made it really clear for that person to engage in different steps along the way. Where that feels extremely different is in that same situation. We would see this formula reversed, where we would see maybe an officer walk up and say, you need to get out of this doorway or you're going to jail. You've been here all day. And by the way, give me your name and birthday because I'm going to run you for warrants. So that is the opposite order that people are going to be more socialized to having, especially for folks who find themselves in doorways with mental health stuff going on. So that's another thing where I take it very seriously to try to break down how I can have that same sort of interaction, but have it be totally different and sometimes even restorative.
Well, thinking about touch and consent, and especially, I know, this training is for mental health and developmental disabilities folks, and you all do such important work and understand the significance of consent at all times, and like how to really like see and center people's agency, and what their desires are and their goals and for outcomes. And so that's just something we're thinking about all of the time, and especially like always around any kind of touch. And like I said, if that's checking to make sure somebody is conscious and breathing, that's communicating like, hey, I'm gonna touch your, I'm gonna just shake your foot. That's also like, hey, if somebody looks like they might want help in and out of the van, that offer, and not assuming that they feel like that they want a hand with that. If somebody does like is having something going on where they're like all of a sudden, oh wow, I'm really dizzy, even just saying like, hey, is it okay, to kind of like be at your side, I'm right here. Just all of that communication and checking in is so critical in our work in terms of really respecting, what being both trauma informed and knowing, like Swift has said, just like what people have dealt with. And so being really aware of, where is our body, and like, how are we in people's space, and communicating about that in a way that feels like is giving them as much agency and safety as is absolutely possible. And just that sense that, if people have had non-consensual touch, then we want to be like extra aware of what it takes to kind of rebuild and create that trust. And that also goes to touching people's belongings. So if I'm going to be helping somebody, say they're moving along and we're going to be doing something next and they have a bunch of different things, I'm going to check and see, do you want me to help you carry your belongings? And I'm not going to assume which of those things they want. I'm going to assume they want all of them, and they can tell me they don't want some of them. And yeah, I just like to think about how I'm communicating and asking for consent in everything I'm doing. And how that consent, goes to this deeper idea of like really joining with what people desire and are looking for in terms of meeting their own needs and establishing, a sense of dignity and safety. This is one of my favorite like kind of frames for the work we do, and I think it fits really well in that build rapport, validate kind of framework that Swift was sharing, is coming back to this question of like, what can I help you with today? Or it might be, what can I help you with this morning or tonight? But really like focusing, narrowing in our time frame so that we're, one, being realistic around like, this is actually what we can deal with, especially if there's, we're recognizing that crises are often multiple and overlapping, and they're the result of systemic oppression and ableism and racism, classism, and all of these systems that we're not going to solve right in this moment. So there's both the understanding of like people have been coping and finding ways of surviving all these systems. And usually there's been something that's happened more recently that's kind of made those coping mechanisms not work, or just something that's made things worse, right? And sometimes that is around like basic needs. It's like many hard things are happening and I haven't eaten today, right? And it's like, we're not gonna, in our role, be able to address all of the kind of overlapping crises and needs, but we might be like, okay, well, let's start there. Like let's start by getting a snack and just like grounding out a little bit and hearing what's going on, right? That empathetic ear, and just holding space, and recognizing that if we are asking like, what's been going on for you, and we don't kind of keep coming back to like present moment or what's been going, what's happened today or in the last few days, that it can open up this sense that, oh my gosh, why don't you tell us your like entire life history and all of your trauma experiences? And that like both that's really overwhelming for somebody, and we're not gonna feel like we have time to kind of help bring closure or hold space for all of that. And what we want to like help people remember is like all of the ways that they do know how to cope and like do have things that they rely on and support that they get, and the kind of strengths and resiliency that they have. And so we're really conscious of like how much are we asking, how much are we trying to like address in the moment. And we also like to not jump ahead. This is that build rapport piece, where we're also really recognizing if we try to jump ahead to like problem solving and think that we know the story, we're going to mess up, right? We recognize that people are the experts of their own stories. And so we do need to learn enough of the story to be like, okay, here are all the things you have tried. And maybe we're not even, we don't even want to get to the problem solving yet. We want to actually just like have that space for the empathetic listening and connecting and hearing what's been going on for somebody. And then we might move into like, okay, and what can we do with this today? Like Swift was saying in that intervention, there was a need to get out of the doorway and to some more resources. And so since the person has named some of those things, then we can meet them in that and support around that. And I'm just recognizing we were gonna get to some questions in the middle, and I think we'll just have a lot of time at the end, if that works. We'll stay longer and make sure we have time to hear everybody's questions. This is a helpful question that we like to ask, just around like, whose crisis is this? And this points at kind of two different things. One, it points at like, sometimes there's a situation that like touches really too close to home and really sets you off. And so at a certain point, I'm either so attached to outcome or so reactive and overwhelmed by it, or just like wrapped up in it and in my own past experiences, that I'm not the best person anymore. I'm not helping. I'm actually like adding to the crisis, right? And so for us, that's always a time where we're going to tap out, and we're going to listen to our partner. If our partner's like, hey, I'd like to think through some things with this person, or I just had a question or an idea, and they're going to step in and like let me kind of step back to be like, oh wow, yeah, I was getting really attached to outcome, or whatever was going on for me. So we don't want to make the crisis our crisis, right? People have enough they're dealing with, and sometimes it recognizes like the crisis might be somebody who made the call, who like observed something that was happening that they were uncomfortable with. They might have, yeah, seen somebody who was having, talking to a tree, or just having a really different experience that they were like, the caller was like, oh, that is weird, or that's not okay. And so they made it about they were like, this is a crisis. But for the person who's doing those things, that might have been a really just totally fine, normal day. And so we like to be like, okay, who's having the crisis? And that can be an audience that's having the crisis. Lots of ways of kind of thinking through that, but it helps to not assume that, whoever we're going to talk to is the one who's like identifying as having the crisis. And with this too, we like to have a harm reduction strategy that's around like not working harder than the client for the outcome. And so it's again meeting and joining like these are the solutions and the coping strategies that are available and what they want. And we might see if there's some opening towards any others, and like really join and support those, but we're not we're not imposing our own ideas about what they should be doing. We're coming, non-judgmental, and we're also not like doing the work for them, because we know it's about supporting them those other 340, the rest of the year, to have agency and to feel empowered and get to make decisions for their own well-being. So in this work, we like to just think and notice like how important it is to kind of come at it from like a perspective of learning and growing. And earlier when I was thinking about grounding, and really just recognizing like when I'm in my own fight, flight, or freeze responses, and if I'm doing work that's really intense and I'm getting into those responses more and more, that the world gets pretty black and white. Everything, I can read things through just kind of like threat or safety lens. And that when I kind of come out of those modes of being into my more complex thinking and social connection and my being, present in the moment, that also the kind of frame for what have I learned from this situation? What could I do differently? What went well? How do I get to connect with my coworkers or other people who I do this really important work with, so that we like get to be in our experience of like learning about this, and how to do it better, is really critical for me in staying sustainable in this type of work. And so in that, I just like to think about like after something that's been intense, after an intervention, spending some more time doing that grounding, and that can be looking around, smelling, feeling how things are, coming into present moment, feeling connected to the values that make you do the work you do, and why you did that, even if it wasn't the outcome you wanted, like really getting to connect back to like, yeah, and I really cared and I really tried. And I think, I have stuff to learn. Connecting, talking to coworkers, friends, writing, reflecting, any of the things that you already do to kind of support self-reflection and growth, like getting to apply that to the learning of, how do we bring more care and more capacity to addressing crises, so that, we don't have to rely upon police or hospitalization, right? That we have community response and capacity. And so knowing that reflection, that practice, takes time and takes support. So also taking care of your emotional and physical well-being in it as being really critical. I know as, you know, caregivers and people in these fields, we can forget that we have to take care of ourselves and do that work in really important ways to be able to continue showing up. So continue doing that as well. And that is our condensed de-escalation presentation, and we're really excited to get to spend some time with questions. Big shout out and gratitude to Judy and Derek for interpreting and everybody for having us. And I think Kristen has been kind of keeping an eye on the chat and can bring us some questions to talk through.
I have been keeping an eye on the chat, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Also, Swift has been answering some questions as they come up, so she may want to come back around to a couple of those. Our YouTube viewers, and they're about 600 right now, can't see those. So any of those that you think would be great to address, you can bring those back up. So one of the questions we've had more than once is about video and phone calls during the pandemic. Do you have suggestions for how to de-escalate over the phone or a video call?
I was thinking about this because it did come in 3 in a row, and at first I didn't know what to say. And then I think some tips that I really try to do with a phone call, a lot of our interactions are trying to engage someone who maybe does not want to speak with us at all. Maybe they did not expect to have an encounter with us until we ended up on their doorstep or on the phone with them because it was a welfare check somebody else placed, something like that. So something that I try to do on the phone is just really be direct and say things like, okay, you're not concerned. Like, can you understand why somebody else is? I don't like to lead with a lot of like, well, would it be all right if we talk about this? Or I don't like to say things like, let us know if there's anything we can help you with. I just kind of want to get straight into the content and say, how is it going? Okay, I heard this happen, just leading with those details and allowing people to go from there. I think also on the phone when I'm dealing with someone who is like rapid speech, difficult to interrupt, that often like what they're communicating to me is, I really, really want to talk to you. And with you, you are a listener. And so it can be hard to want to interrupt, but it actually can be the biggest gift you can give by saying like, I need a minute. Can I have a minute? Can I have, and holding that until I get the minute to then contribute. And if that goes poorly, I won't do that again. But that's a big skill for me, like intentional interruptions.
I'm going to say it's our time is up for anyone who's wanting to leave. Berkeley and Swift have agreed to stay on and answer questions for a few minutes, so we're going to hang out here. But we invite you to respect your time. That if you need to go, the hour is up, and you will receive your CEU certificate if you fill out your evaluation and want to get that certificate. So just want to make that note. And then here's another question. This one was in the chat. Do you have any body language tips for someone with difficult and different physical abilities, such as the person who uses a wheelchair or different mobility?
In terms of, yeah, modifying body position and using, yeah, body language for communicating, I think about, you know, what some of what we're conveying is like, yeah, we're grounded, we're here, I'm not in a rush. And so like, even if it's like a different kind of lean or head nod or like the position, of like the wheelchair that's not like, okay, towards the door or like, you know, like looking like ready to go. It can be, yeah, we're doing so much with like eye contact and facial expressions. We add more, you know, kind of like verbal affirmations of like, yeah, I hear you. So many different ways. And in thinking about like what else we're trying to convey through body language, it's like, yeah, it's really about groundedness, presence, not rushing, listening. And so I think we can get creative and really just think about like we're avoiding authority, you know, like things that feel like like authoritative, kind of hovering over and imposing on people. And so there's going to be a lot of different ways that we can get creative, to not do those things and yeah, convey what we want. But Swift, do you have other particular body language ones?
I think the positioning piece is still really applicable in terms of like kind of placement in a room and not blocking exits and trying to demonstrate both to the person you're working with that you're a team and how that is perceived through the room. Um, yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind for me. And I think those like angling tricks can be used at really like smaller levels too, even from just how you're holding your face or your facial expressions.
Okay, we have a question about your relationship with law enforcement and how you keep positive relationships with law enforcement personnel.
Well, in Eugene, our relationship has been 31 years old. So what has come of that, like for me, is I got to step into a program that had a lot of institutional trust. We stay extremely, extremely busy on Cahoots. And while not all calls that come through our dispatch center now are calls that would necessarily be calls that police or traditional first responders would come to, we are about 17% of the phone calls that come through public safety, and about 7% of those are defined as diversion calls for the police. At any given point, there's usually only one Cahoots van on the road, which means two Cahoots workers, diverting 7% of police work where there are generally dozens of officers on the road. So our relationship works because it works at the ground level. We make their jobs easier in a lot of ways, more comprehensive in a lot of ways. For every 5 times we're contacting someone, that's, 5 less times that they are. So it's just really, really, really functional. And that can, really exist in its own vacuum as it operates and plays out and calls on the street. And again, like we have been put into this new magnified era of Cahoots being noticed and police's role within communities being noticed. So that has been, something to recontextualize and work on for ourselves now. But I think as it plays out on calls and in the field, it's extremely fluid, and we all know what each other can and cannot do. And we also know the factors of when something has escalated to a police call, we know our limits. And so we step away. We don't try to cowboy situations or be the hero of situations. Just like within that kind of helps foster trust with the police that when something has dropped below punitive, criminal, whatever, they get us involved as frequently as possible. So it's definitely a feedback loop.
Yeah. Just the one extra piece I like to think about is like police generally didn't join because they wanted to be like counselors and mediators, like maybe some of them, but I think, yeah, like when we just like look at the rapid defunding of the last 40 years of so many social services and, you know, all of the things from housing to healthcare and services for people with substance use and everything else. We get to provide a role that, like Switch was saying, like a lot of times officers aren't looking to do that. And so they're really grateful that we're like, yep, that's, we are here for that. And we have this training and it is different and we show up in a different way. And the piece that we get to not be attached to outcomes and we're never forcing anybody to do anything they don't want to do means that, yeah, we have a really different way of being perceived and operating. It's quite useful.
Thanks. Okay, we got a couple more questions. I am currently advocating for the creation of a similar program in my city. How would you describe the value of this program and this kind of de-escalating service to policymakers?
I mean, that's a whole other presentation.
Yeah.
Which I will say there is a lot of information on the whitebirdclinic.org website that has a lot of numbers, a lot of data that I think speaks to more policymaker minded presentations of our work versus us today. So I really just want to direct you all towards that because I will get tangential on the other side of things.
Okay, and one last question. What financial resources do workers bring to your situations for food, transportation, etc.?
Yeah, like you said, snacks, water. This year with COVID and honestly our city's like general failure to create affordable housing and shelter, we have a lot more like tents and blankets and kind of emergency, just like trying to support people and staying warm and being okay when they have to sleep out because there's not shelter. There's only one shelter in our town. And so that is something that we've really like done a whole bunch more of this year. And in general, we have supplies that kind of like support in our interactions and are trying to be somewhat different than just like outreach with supplies all the time, because that could be everything we did.
Also, we did not talk a lot about, but again, our partnership is always a medic and a crisis worker. So we're providing medical assessments and first aid really frequently. And that is a big piece of what allows us to divert in the field. So that could look like us giving first aid to somebody who has self-harmed while the crisis worker is counseling. And because we're able to do those two things together, we don't have to transport to the hospital. Whereas if traditional EMS showed up, they might just look at the wounds and say, there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know if your wounds are safe. We don't know if you can keep yourself safe. We're gonna just try to convince you to go to the hospital now. If we cannot convince you, we're gonna have law enforcement or whatever powers where you are that can facilitate a involuntary transport do that. So I think that holistic model, that more like behavioral health model, has always been part of our work of what we're showing up with medically.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Elaine, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here today. Thank you, Berkeley and Swift and Cahoots, and thank you to all our participants. and we will see you on our next webinar. We will post this webinar on our MHDD channel, and we have already posted the link for the evaluation or to get a certificate of attendance. We've posted the link to Whiteberg Clinic and to our website. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.